Hi. We've Today is the 2nd of September, and we have the threat of the doctor's strike in about a week or so. And I don't know why it is that some politicians and some people in the medical profession say that we are going to be protected, and that it's going to be safe for them to go on strike and that everything will be covered. I think when we are told throughout our lives that the NHS is stretched to its limit, even when it's working fully, and I know that for myself. I've been in hospital in a dire straits, and there's just been one doctor who is on call supposedly for that particular section. I don't know how true that was, or whether it's just a case that they didn't feel I needed to be seen that night, even though the next morning I was taken into ITU. So doctors and nurses are not perfect, as I'm not. But I've got this detail that I've written here. I don't know whether you'll be able to read it, but I'm going to, you might want to zone in on it or stop your video so that you can read it, but you may not be able to. It may be too small. But I'll tell you in brief, because when I've spoken to people about what they feel, asking them whether they feel that the doctors are right to go on strike or not, they say, oh, I haven't looked into it, I'll look into it and I'll come back to you. And this is the problem. It's such a complicated situation. People haven't got time. They're working, or they're not well, or they're looking after their family and this sort of thing. But when you're not well, then you realise how much you need the doctors, and we need the NHS, and how fortunate that we are that we have the NHS free at the point of use, of need. And that isn't always the case as well in the world. I'm going to read out now what I've written here so that I don't keep repeating myself. But the basis is, are doctors' strikes premeditated manslaughter? And I say this because if they go on strike, it's obviously going to delay other procedures and treatments. But anyway, I'll read here. So are doctors' strikes premeditated manslaughter? Doctors say they fear for the NHS. I fear for my life and the lives of patients every time doctors strike, and the consequences thereafter that strike. For the damage of each strike is compounded due to the backup of cancelled appointments and treatment. My aunt, for example, had an operation for cancer to be removed from her hand. It was cancelled twice due to the previous strikes earlier on this year in 2016, and a delay of 2 or 3 months occurred, and the cancer grew. We all know the significance of such a delay. This is just one instance. There will be thousands or millions of varying degrees of danger to lives and health like this, for men, women and children, if the doctors go on strike. The BMA, the British Medical Association, has recommended the new contract to doctors, and we assume therefore that the safety issues of extreme hours for doctors and staffing, and for the new 7-day NHS service to the extent that it can be safeguarded under the severe circumstances that the NHS is under, was acceptable to reasonable, experienced, professional assessment of the BMA. So the BMA recommended this new contract that has been offered the doctors now, and they said it could be accepted and taken. The 7-day NHS service and the new doctor contracts are untested, and they do need to be tried and tested, and then maybe be re-evaluated in 2 to 3 years. And for those doctors who do not wish to stay or sign the new contract, then let them provide their notice of termination in the proper manner, but not strike and cause this total unexpected immediate destruction to the NHS and to the lives of the people who are relying on them to be treated. Yes. So we pay the politicians to manage the NHS and other public services, not the doctors. This is not the job they are paid to do. The politicians, I assume, have researched into this and have been advised by professionals, and they're trying to change the system in order to maintain the service and presumably to save lives as well, because we're told that at weekends there's a greater risk of death. Now, it's going to be difficult, but it is a case that nobody likes change. And I read recently that Nye Bevin, who was the one who set up the NHS in the first place, the doctors at the time actually opposed him for setting it up. So this is how the irony of issues, and that we may think we're right, but doctors are doctors and need to stay with their job and let the politicians do their job too. The doctors have made their point about how they feel, and there have been concessions made. And it isn't a case that they can just keep saying, come back to the table, because we're going to come back to the table until you do what we want. That isn't negotiation. Doctors will be holding the public to ransom. For after 3 years of negotiation and numerous concessions, the doctors still say they want to strike, and for the government to be sensible and pay and do all the doctors demand. That is not negotiation, it is blackmail of the public and the taxpayer. In some cases, it will be premeditated deferred manslaughter for those patients unlucky enough to need the NHS care during the strikes and afterwards. The doctors will destroy the NHS and many lives this year if they pursue these strikes. Then they will say the politicians did it. But it won't be the case. It's the doctors that are doing it. Even as the miners' strike destroyed the economy decades ago, where we had 3 days a week and power cuts and a whole year of miners' strikes. And in the end, the coal mining industry has gone. The strikes don't do anything, or triggers the governments and others to actually make something privatized so that the strikes don't occur again. And we've got the similar problem with the tube strikes and the railway strikes. Even as the miners' strikes destroyed the economy decades ago, lives were not at stake then. The doctors' action is far worse, not even fully supported by the BMA union, for the BMA have advised doctors to accept the recent contract changes. So the doctors can't say that it's for safety, or if it is for safety and there's a problem, then let it fall onto the politicians then, because they are the ones that are managing these services, not the doctors. And I thank those doctors that continue to work and not strike, and for those that have saved my life several times in the past. But for those doctors that continue to strike, you have forgotten your Hippocratic oath and also your humanity. And hereafter, I suggest strikes in the NHS should be a criminal act. And perhaps all strikes should be illegal. We have ACAS now to resolve issues. And let us be a civilized society and not have the railway strikes, the tube strikes, the Channel Tunnel strikes that cause so much disruption, the airline strikes that cause so much destruction to the public, selfishly. We should be able to discuss these things, and with ACAS, it is an independent body, and they both sides should be able to come together to discuss it, make an agreement, and that's the end of it. And if people are not happy in their job, then they give their notice in the normal manner, and the employers take the repercussions of that or not, or move on. So as I say, doctor strikes will kill or reduce life expectancy on many, many, many men, women and children. Don't try and deceive us or yourselves. This is the case, and you'll destroy the NHS as well, because as you go on strike, as usually the case, these institutions or companies are made private, and that's what you say you don't want, and I don't want that either. So you will destroy it this year. You'll destroy the NHS. You'll destroy our public confidence in you, the doctors, because I thought you cared. But I see that you don't care if you're willing to do this. Because you could kill me. You might have killed my aunt earlier than her time. That's just one family.